Welcome to the Mongoose Press Knowledge is Power Chess Series. This is episode 4, What to Do When You Gain Control of the Center. And one frequently hears people in chess talk about the importance of the center of the board. It's so important to control the center, but why exactly? I mean, what good is it if I can control the center for my opponent, but I'm not exactly sure what to do with it once I've got control of it? Well, today we're going to be looking at a game from the Mongoose Press publication, Chess Blueprints, Planning in the Middle Game, by Nikolai Yakovlev. This game should perfectly illustrate the power of center control. And the position before us is from the game Leonhardt versus Byrne in Carlsbad 1911. And in this position, White has firm control of the center of the board, and Black needs to start thinking about trying to tear down the pawn duo on e4 and d4 with thrusts c5, d5, or possibly even f5. Now Black has just played bishop g4, pinning the knight on f3. And as stated, White has very strong control of the center of the board, but Black is threatening to win a pawn or to damage White's pawn structure. So what is White to do? Well, Leonhardt here plays 11 queen d3. And this is the kind of move that I love playing, especially in online games, because for some reason, online players tend to overvalue a damaged pawn structure and will most always, certainly in this position, play bishop takes f3. But after bishop takes f3, g takes f3, White is simply going to move his king over to h1 and then move his rook to g1 and use that rook to put some severe pressure on the Black king side. So combined with the pin on f7 and also the bishop ready to sacrifice itself on h6, White has a really strong position here, and I can't tell you how many times I have just destroyed an opponent with a pawn structure and setup almost exactly like this. You're almost begging your opponent to take the knight on f3 so that you can capture back with the g-pawn, and again it looks like you're ruining your pawn structure, but really you're gaining a fierce attack. But I admit it's hard to suggest a better move in the position. What jumped out to me immediately was rook c8 with the plan of playing knight to e7 followed by pawn to c5. As stated, Black needs to try to tear down the White center, and this is one way that he could go about trying to do that. But instead, Black opts for rook to e8, a fairly natural looking move to get the rook into the game. White responds with knight d2, and he's getting out of the way of bishop takes knight. He's also bolstering the control of e4. Queen e7, rook a e1. White brings an extra piece into the fray. Rook a d8, and pawn to a3. Now, a3 is one of these moves that really separates good players from great players. And at first glance, it really kind of seems like a waste of a move because it's evident that White's play is going to be on the king side here, and he's going to start pressing his pawns up the board and try to trap the Black king in a pawn storm. However, he plays a3 here because it's a little bit of a necessary prophylaxis on his part. Black's only counterplay in this situation is the potential knight b4 gaining a tempo on the queen, while he could possibly follow up with c5, hitting the White center. So White's getting ready to go on the offensive, but before he does, he shores up his position and plays a3, ensuring that Black has absolutely no counterplay in the position. Actually, very strong move. Queen f8, pawn to f4. Now this is a very multi-purpose move. White is pressing the king side now, but there's also a real important tactical idea here. White is threatening to trap the White bishop by playing pawn to f5, followed by h3. Black sees the threat, so he plays bishop back to c8. White plays pawn to h3. He's preparing the pawn thrust to g4, and the kingside assault is rolling. Now I should take a moment here and state that generally speaking, you should only push the pawns in front of your castled king in two situations. One, if the center is completely closed, or two, if you have a firm grip on the center, as is the case before us. Because believe me, you do not want to find yourself in a situation where you have played f4 and g4 and h3, and all of a sudden your opponent is able to open up the center of the board and your king is being assailed by queens and bishops and knights and the like. It's not pleasant. Black is somewhat out of useful moves already, so he plays a waiting move here with king to h8. White follows up, of course, with his plan. Pawn to g4. The press continues. Knight e7. King h1. Getting out of the possible pin on g1 and also making room for the rook to potentially move to g1 in the future if needed. Now, there is no doubt that white has a sizable positional advantage here. But notice that he's really taking his time. He is not playing wild attacking moves like pawn to f5 or pawn to g5, and he doesn't really have to. What he's doing here is shoring up every potential weakness in his camp before striking. And this is kind of an important lesson, because when you have a positional advantage, let your opponent suffer a little bit. Take your time, make your position perfect, and make him wait and suffer, and make him wonder how long is it going to be before you bring the pain. And there's a real heavy psychological element to that, but also it's just good chess. Make sure your position is totally strong before you press the attack. I mean, you've got all the time in the world here, and he can't really do anything but just sit and stew and wait. So you've got all the time in the world here to make your position perfect before you strike out and bring the thunder. Okay, pawn to d5. Black finally strikes at the white center, but really it's already too late. The center is too strong and the attack is rolling. So white comfortably plays pawn to e5 here. Black has to retreat, knight h7, pawn to f5, and white's preparing to play pawn to f6 and just tear this thing wide open. So black tries to stop the bleeding a little bit by playing f6 himself, because he knows white getting the pawn to f6 is going to have very, very bad results for him. So pawn to f6, and white calmly plays pawn to e6, and the kingside attack, just like that, is over with. Now black might think that he can breathe easily for a moment because the attack's over. But let's survey the scene. White has a protected passed pawn on e6. The center is locked, and black has no hope of trying to open it. All of his pieces are placed awkwardly, and they are not working towards any kind of a plan except for survival. White has started the game by playing in the center, and then once the center was under firm control, he switched to a kingside assault. Now that the kingside is under lock and key, he's going to switch play back over to the queenside now, and black can't really do anything to stop him. And that's really the power of controlling the center. That's the power of flexibility, being able to play on any three sections of the board that you want, and the center control permits you to do that. All right, the game continued. Black plays pawn to c6, and what he's trying to do is to get his bishop on the more active outpost c7. But white plays bishop to f4 and puts a stop to that. Knight g8. Knight to a4. White begins his work on the queen side. Okay, bishop a5. Bishop c2. Queen to e7. Now, with queen to e7, black has a clear idea of trying to get his bishop back to the c7 outpost. And once again, white denies that idea. So pawn to b5, knight to c5, bishop back to b6, pawn to b4, knight f8. Again, kind of a strange looking move, but what else is black going to do here? And pawn to a4. Now this is an awesome move because what started as center domination turned to a kingside pawn storm. So it's pretty ironic that after all that, an innocuous looking pawn move on a4 is the deciding factor in the game, because this move gives white total superiority on the queen side. He's going to break it wide open. He's going to have control of the queen side. And black is really helpless to prevent white's domination in the center, the king side, and the queen side. I mean, he is just totally lost here. But he plays on. He lashes out with pawn to a5. And white follows up, solidifying the knight on c5 in case bishop takes c5. Then he can follow up with knight takes c5 and still have a really strong outpost for the knight. Okay, black tries bishop takes a4. And white comes up with a really nice move here, knight takes a5. And black really can't do anything but start trading. So he carelessly plays bishop takes c5, and while that looks like a decent move, black actually has some chances if white just recaptures. White finds a very nice in-between move here with knight takes c6, exclamation mark. And black does not have much better than just giving up his queen in this position. And in fact, that's exactly what Byrne does. He gives up his queen. The best play probably was queen to b7. But after queen b7, knight takes d8, rook takes d8, take c5, and white is solidly up an exchange, and black really doesn't have any compensation whatsoever. In fact, he is still in tremendous danger with the passed pawn on e6. But the game went after knight takes c6, bishop takes d4, knight takes e7, and black resigned just a few moves later. So that is an excellent demonstration of the power of the center. Both sides of a chess game generally have counterplay. Sometimes white plays on the king side and black plays on the queen side, or vice versa. But having control of the center of the board really allows you to call the shots. You can play on the king side, or you can play on the queen side. And if your opponent tries to counterplay on the other side of the board or in the center, you kind of stifle that idea and disallow him the power of doing just so. So that illustrates the power of controlling the center of the board. Hope you've enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time around.